my earliest experiences in politics was when I was in high school. I went to high school in Governor Reagan's limousine because my bishop in the LDS Church was his driver.
Wow.
And so it was a great experience. And I got to go watch him sign bills. So I had an early start at all of this.
Welcome to Motivational Mondays, conversations with me, David Ibarra, and my special guest, Ron Fox. Ron is the president and founder and owner of the Fox Group, and we're going to get into a great conversation, but he's also my neighbor. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I look forward to our little conversation.
Tell me, next door, you've been in Utah and very involved in community service, politics, and others. What is the basis of your prime business with the Fox Group?
Well, for many years I was a lobbyist, both in Washington, D.C. and in Utah, and I've actually just become a lobbyist again for a firm my daughter works for. But primarily I've been selling history. I've been selling photographs and documents and books relative to U.S. and Utah history.
Now, next door, you're right. There's two antique stores, yours
Correct.
and Anthony's, I believe. And tell us about the kinds of collections, because you're into rare books. And somebody recently told me you have some knife and fork.
Oh,
fork from like way back.
well, I just acquired a spoon actually, and it was a spoon that was made in about 1810. And the initials tell it all on the back of the fork. It's FSMK, and it stood for Francis Scott Key and Mary.
Wow.
So it's a nice piece of history to have that. And I have a wall that I dedicated in my office where I have the handwritten copy of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, America the Beautiful, God Bless America, and America or My Country 'Tis a Thee.
Wow. All the handwritten by...
Yeah, by the authors.
That's quite a collection.
Yeah.
Quite a collection.
I forgot John Philip Sousa and Stars and Stripes Forever and George M. Cohan.
So do you sing any of those?
No. I sing solo. No one can hear me.
Well, tell me some of the other things that you have in your collection, because you have some rare books, I believe.
I have rare books, but I also have... on my wall, I have a wall with the Declaration of Independence in the center, but I have a John Hancock 1776 signed commission for a military officer for the Revolution. I've got Thomas Jefferson and James Madison on a ship's paper. I have John Adams on an envelope that he signed, Free Frank. I have one of my heroes is Roger Sherman, and he was involved with the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, every major document, and he was in the first House, and then he was in the second Senate. So he's a man who really served. And the last one I've got is Robert K. Livingston, and he is the gentleman who swore George Washington in, but he was one of the 5 people that were on the committee that drafted the Declaration. And lastly, I have a 1748 newspaper that old Ben Franklin actually turned the lever and printed himself.
That's quite a collection.
Oh, and then I've got about 40,000 items other than that.
Now, all of these are offered to the general public for purchase?
Well, I sell some, and on the Founding Fathers, those are going to go up in the Capitol for the year 2026 on an exhibit about our American history.
Unbelievable. So you're a history buff.
Yes. My wife says I should be living back in the turn of the century, of the 19th century or the 17th century or 18th century, but I do love history.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what, we'd all be better served if we knew our history better.
Well, it's the old thing, sometimes if we don't follow history, we're condemned to repeat it.
That's true. That's true. Well, I wanted to go back to the very beginning. I didn't realize we've been neighbors for quite some time. And and I think this is a good place. You are a Republican.
Yep.
I'm a Democrat.
Yep.
And you are always easy to talk to.
Well, I think that civil dialogue is probably the most important thing we have.
Mm-hmm.
One of the newspapers I have on my wall is the first mention in the drafting of the Bill of Rights by James Madison, and he talks about the fact that we needed civil discourse and that we needed freedom of the press and freedom of the religion.
Right.
And I think that we all need to follow that.
Yeah, I am 100% in agreement there with my party. I'm really disappointed with our extreme stream that we've gone, and frankly, I feel similar about the Republican Party. But the one thing that I always enjoyed is that good conversation doesn't have a party. Problem solving isn't about party line, and it's unfortunate that we have almost turned it into a sport in teams instead of conversation.
A blood sport sometimes.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but, I've had the honor, the governor appointed me to be co-chair of the America 250 Commission, where we're honoring our Declaration of Independence in July 4th of 2026, but we're starting our activities as of July 1st of this year for Utah. And we have many things that we're going to do, but the important thing is we're going to have debates and we're going to have things on campuses, and we're educating our children relative to the Founding Fathers and the importance of the freedoms that we do have and should enjoy.
Well, who was it that said in history that we'll be able to judge our country's strength and progress based on how the majority party treats the minority partner?
Yes,
party.
And I have to tell you, I had a good friend, Oscar McConkie, who was a president of the Senate, a very close friend of John F. Kennedy, was his campaign manager, was with him when he was here in 1963, and he told me about his best friend was the Republican minority leader when he was president of the Senate in Utah, and how they would go on camping trips, and their family and their kids were friends, and they just spent all their time together, and they worked together for the common good.
Well, it's interesting when we look back at history and we see Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. They liked each other.
They did,
and they worked well with each other.
They did. My earliest experiences in politics was when I was in high school. I went to high school in Governor Reagan's limousine because my bishop in the LDS Church was his driver.
Wow.
And so it was a great experience. And I got to go watch him sign bills. So I had an early start at all of this.
Well, it was interesting, too. As you know, my brother was a senior advisor to President Clinton.
Yes.
And part of the history that will be released upon the death of President Clinton and Newt Gingrich will be their emails. And within it, they say everybody's going to be quite surprised because they liked each other. And they worked well together with each other.
I believe that, no question. Mike Leavitt wrote me a letter the night he spent in the White House when Bill Clinton was president. And then he told me afterwards, because he knows I'm a collector, so he thought, okay, I'm going to send Ron a letter. It was 2 a.m. He says, I sat on the couch with Bill Clinton. He was one of the most engaging, polite conversationalists that he had ever been involved with. And I mean, Bill was like FDR in that he had this way about him that he could talk to anybody.
About almost anything.
Oh, brilliant.
The guy had a
Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get an appointment from the president to serve on the Air Force board of visitors for 3 years. And went to Colorado Springs and got to inspect the facility, the curriculum, and the morale of our cadets, and report back to the president with our findings, and served with General Scowcroft, Brett Scowcroft, who's from Ogden, I believe. And I couldn't help but when one of my visits to the president, I asked him, I said, he said, is there anything you'd like to ask me? I said, there is. And I said,
long list.
How does it make you feel when everybody comments that you are an incredible waffler? You cannot you waffle, you change. And he stood up, walked over, put his right hand on my shoulder, and he said, David, I prefer to call that listening. That if you have a conversation with another, neither person should leave the conversation without altering their opinion a little. And I said, boy, that is a different way of looking at it. But let's talk about
That's politics, though.
Yeah.
That's we need to find the middle on things.
We sure
more
do.
often.
And America is the middle, right or left. I ran for mayor of this city,
Yes,
as
you
you
did.
know, and got my hat handed to me. I was too conservative. I am a Democrat, but I am very conservative in the business sector.
Yes, you are.
And I'm center left on social issues. I'm center right on business issues. And that's just not today I get invited to leave the party. But I won't.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Because, I believe, like the Republican Party, it's a big tent. We have liberal wings and we have conservative wings.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes one over the other takes over and is in charge. And we have some people that are very strong. In the Republican Party in Utah, we had a situation a number of years ago when the Libertarians finally figured out that there was no chance for them to do anything, so they all left their party and joined our party.
Uh-huh.
And that all caused a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand that we understand each other. I mean, it's whether you're in the liberal wing of the Democratic Party or the conservative wing, you better learn that the American public is really pretty down the middle.
Yes. Well, I tell you this, is that this bothers the party that I belong to, but I've said it often. If you counted all of my votes, it's about 60-40.
Mm-hmm.
Why is
Accurate.
that? You vote for Republicans? Yes. And one of the things I would interview anybody that I've ever asked me for my support, have you ever voted for a person in the opposite party? If they say yes, then I'm going to consider supporting, because it should be about leadership.
It is
Who
about
is
leadership.
the best leader at the moment?
And I think that, just to carry on, we've seen in this last election versus the election before with Biden versus Kamala Harris, the Hispanic population, CNN reported, did a 40% shift. Now, these are U.S. citizens who have Hispanic names. That's a huge shift. And that should concern the Democratic Party.
Well, and it's not the first time,
No.
Ron, when you look at Bush 2, Bush 2, if I'm not mistaken, came in with 46% of the Hispanic vote, and it was led by an advertising company that is a dear friend of mine, an individual by the name of Lionel Sosa, who was Ronald Reagan's ad man. And simply put, I asked Lionel, I said, how did you achieve that? And he said, the president didn't articulate himself well, but his values matched up with ours. So I simply put him in B-roll everywhere, at the church, at the schools, in health care, and we narrated it because he's a good man and he believes like our community. Darn near got the majority of the vote.
Yeah.
At what age do you wish you had unlocked the principles that lead to success? Where do you think you'd be today if you had learned them as a child? Yes, Our Kids Can is a program developed at Harvard and tested in San Antonio's school systems, designed to give children of all backgrounds the opportunity to plant the seeds for future success, using learning techniques they understand and enjoy. Through engaging animated stories, fun sing-along songs, and interactive games, Yes, Our Kids Can teaches your child the empowering, success-driven principles needed to reach their full potential. Don't miss this opportunity to give your children the future they deserve. Yes, Our Kids Can is available now on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Sign up today and help make your child's dreams a reality.
Now,
Wonderful.
let's shift over
You bet.
to you
Oh.
in your beginning. Tell us about you in your early years, and you're a Californian.
I'm a Californian. I've been here, though, 33 years, so I feel almost...
They've almost forgiven you.
Yeah, 39 years there, and I spent a lot of time in California. I raised there. I had a godmother who was Republican. My parents were Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, we usually follow our parents and our
Sure.
political parties,
Uh-huh.
but this woman had a real hold on me, and I did door hangers for Richard Nixon in 1960.
Wow.
That was my first experience.
Wow.
And then I, student council and all that type of stuff. College, I did the same thing, was head of the finance department. I figured if you had the money, it's the old saying, whoever has a goal makes the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So after college, I started doing two things. I started off as a White House advance man. I lived in Orange County.
Right.
Worked for Richard Nixon,
Mm-hmm.
traveled with his people, and took bags off of Air Force One and parked cars at San
Right.
Clemente. So, the learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also went to work for a legislator in California and finally ended up as the head of the Senate Finance Committee for the Republicans,
Mm-hmm.
and then the assistant to majority leader. So
Right.
I've had some great experiences, but I've worked for 6 U.S. presidents doing events for them all over the world.
Is that right? That's perfect. Now, where did you go to college? Where did you get
California State College, or California State University, Fullerton.
Fullerton.
Yeah.
Well, you and I have a bit of history because I might have been your neighbor.
You probably were.
I used to run
Mm-hmm.
all of the Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor restaurants in Southern California.
And as you can see with my girth, believe me, I visited Farrell's often.
Well, which one's Fullerton?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I went to Fullerton Junior College.
Oh, I went there for 1 year.
Yeah. Whenever I got a promotion, Farrell's was owned by Marriott.
Yep.
And whenever they gave me a promotion, I didn't feel like I had the education I needed. So I'd always look at the job description, and it said contracts. And I go, so I took contract law at anything I didn't know. I went to a community college, then called junior college,
Yep.
but community college, and just took the specialized skills that I needed to where I felt that very comfortable in the job responsibilities that had been handed to me.
Junior colleges are, in my opinion, one of the greatest institutions there are.
Boy, I'll tell you what, I hear the dialogue about whether we should have 14 years I hate to hear the word free because it's not free. I would prefer to have it labeled that the first things taken out of tax collected revenues from the citizens or residents of our country will be education.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe for selfish reasons, healthcare as well, because as a business owner, I want to have a nice selection of talent is the only thing that's going to hold us back by maintaining our economic strength.
I understand.
But when it came back to Farrell's, I lived there in your area for about 8 years. It was
a great place to live.
It was a great place. So you ended up getting to what position before you left and came to Utah? What bring you to Utah?
Well, I was, it's really an interesting story, but a quick one. I had worked for a healthcare company as a lobbyist after leaving the legislature's employment. And then I was here with my wife and children, who were very small at the time, and went to Education Week at BYU. And I had a friend who I had helped become an intern at FHP Healthcare. And he called me and he says, well, what are you doing in Utah? Just out of the blue, called me. I just said, I'm here for Education Week. And he says, would you be interested in a job? We have an opening in Salt Lake City for a director of public affairs to handle political as well as, community giving and that. I said, well, I would certainly visit with you about it. And he says, well, I'll have an interview for you tomorrow, the day before we left. And so I was interviewed that day, went back to Southern California where their headquarters were, interviewed there, flew back up 2 days later, and they offered me the job.
What year was that?
This was 1991.
Wow.
And so I had the job 4 days, basically in 5 days, my life changed.
It's interesting. I worked for Marriott. I was in charge, and I'd left Marriott and got a call and they said they wanted to give me an exit interview, and I said, well, okay. It was the same day, and go to the airport, and I said, well, who will be giving me my exit interview? Richard Marriott. I said,
Dick, yeah.
Richard Marriott? And he said, yeah. And so he came and talked to me and said, David, when you started a district manager's position with us, you indicated that in 10 years you wanted to be your own business owner. And if you will stay 6 months and help me straighten out the things that have gone wrong with Farrell's, I will sell you the Farrell's in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'll loan you the money. And that's how I got in business, was the Marriott, and particularly Richard Marriott.
Yeah.
I had to give up my 401k to them, and I had to take a bill, but they gave me the loan.
Great opportunity.
Great opportunity, and that's how I came. I was born in Utah, but that's how I came back in 1978.
Well, Dick lives now up in Park City, and Bill lives in Washington, D.C., and I had the honor earlier in my life to meet the dad, Jay Willard. I
as well. Mm-hmm.
And it was a great family and a great business.
I tell you, when Mr. Marriott, we had an issue at the Torrance store, and it wasn't my assignment, that property, but they called me out of a convention and said, "You're going. We got this, and this." So I show up there, and it was early morning. I think I was there at 8 o'clock, 7:30, and all of a sudden a black car drove up, and out steps an elderly man with an oxygen tank behind him and another well-dressed man, and it was Mr. Marriott himself.
That's a big deal.
Greatest experience. First thing he did, walked around, and he looked under every table to see if there was any gum there. What a detailed guy.
I love that.
What a detailed guy. So
I was invited to go to their when they opened the new Port Beach Marriott, and Bill and his father J.W. were there, and I got to. They took us out on a boat ride, and so I went out with them and we chatted. But it was a great experience.
From hot shops, for an A&W root beer to a hot shop to what they've built is just an absolutely incredible American success story, no doubt about it.
Question.
So you came to Utah.
Came to Utah, started this job with FHP Healthcare as their in-house lobbyist. I stayed there for about 2 years, and then I opened up my own shop and represented basically telecommunications and some construction companies, and I did a number of things for the legislature itself. I felt that they needed to, from my experience in California, that they needed to have more staff at the top to have an agenda, to have communications and press releases. So I was doing press releases for them while being a lobbyist on the other side, but there was never an ask.
Right.
So it was all interesting.
Did you get involved in any publications or writing of you'd start with a plan, organizing it, and executing it, and you're known to do all three.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about? Have you done any writing on your own?
Well, I've done some writing on my own or jointly with co-authors. I've done 2 books.
Right.
One called "When the White House Comes to Zion," which is with Mike Winder, a good friend, and he had done a book earlier, but I wanted to get a photographic, book that was more of a coffee table book, and showing all of the different visits from U.S. Grant to Barack Obama at the time.
Wow.
And that was a good seller. It sold 25,000 copies.
That is good in the book. Being in I've written a couple of books myself, and I'm halfway through my third, but it's not easy. It's not done in months.
No, it's not done in months. And I did a second book with Michael DeGroot, who used to work for the Deseret News and is a writer. And we did a book on the founding fathers of the signers, the 55 signers, and did bios with them. And then we also linked in the story of Wilford Woodruff and the work that he did for them in St. George.
Yeah, you are a historian.
Yeah. I love being able to pick up history. And I have, right now at my desk that I found off of the KSL.com was the governor's desk from 1915 to 1972. It's an old roll top, but I love it because it's historic, and I have photographs with everybody from Governor Bangerter and Governor Spry and all the other governors down to Governor Rampton sitting behind that desk.
Wow.
And so
I'm going to have to walk across the street.
Yeah, you do. You need to, because
I
have nothing. I have JFK's flag that he had from his limo that he presented to Lillian Rogers Park, who wrote the book Backstairs at the White House.
Wow.
And I have a lot of 1776 related newspapers. The announcement of the publishing of the first day that it was published of Common Sense.
Wow.
America's first bestseller.
Wow.
Sold 300,000 copies in 1776 in the first year, and then it got exported to France, and they had a little revolution after that.
Well, I got it. I'm definitely coming over.
We look forward to that.
Tell me, you're known as being a common sense guy.
We like to think so.
And has had quite a career at the Capitol and the Hill and lobbying. And people think about a lobbyist as an influencer to do sometimes not good, but they forget that without the lobbyist representing, I as an individual or a company have a right to be represented to the people that are creating that. And it cannot be done without, oftentimes, or the majority of the times, a lobbyist.
Well, a lobbyist needs to know both sides of the issue that he's lobbying, to be able to know the good and the bad of both sides, and sometimes to strike a compromise from the standpoint of getting something accomplished. You can't usually get major things done in Utah or any other state. And one of the best experiences I've had in my life is my wife, who got started and created Mothers Against Drunk Drivers in California in 1980, which took off. And I love her to death, because she got hit by a car, and Candy Leitner, who lost her daughter at the same time, like 10 days before, my wife called her up and she said, we got to change this. And together, my wife raised the money, and Candy was the face, and it worked.
That's incredible. Now, you've been married quite a long time.
50 years in January.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, tell me, how long have you been lobbying?
I started lobbying. I almost feel like, when you work for the legislature, you're all you do is listen. And I've had some great experience listening. I had a guy by the name of Cesar Chavez come one day into me and talk to me for an hour with Joyce Huerta. Was that?
Dolores
Huerta. Dolores
yeah,
Huerta. And I was thinking the fundraiser, Joyce Valdez.
Yes.
But that was an experience. And I sat down with Harvey Milk, and I sat down with David Packer, and I sat down with one day with Armand Hammer. I mean, just great people that you would have no chance, just as an average Joe, to sit down with. But then in the lobbying business, you have to really drill down to understand what the goal is and how to achieve the goal. And I'm a half a loaf man. You can get the half a loaf first, and then maybe try to get the other half later.
A slice at a time.
Slice at a time.
I tell you something. The one of the things that I always try to remind my friends that are opinionated is that a good bill is a bill that neither side really loves.
Yeah, it's true. That's really true.
There's got to be compromise, and we're not in that place right now. We're not in a place of listening or compromising. I believe we'll get back.
We will. America will only succeed when America succeeds with everybody together.
Boy, couldn't be said better.
Thank you.
And I think on those words, we'll end our program. I've got a little gift here for you I'd like to give you for being on our program today.
Well, much appreciate that.
It's called Live Ready, Beyond, Think, and Grow Rich. And I hope you enjoy it. And I want to thank you very much, Ron, for being on our program. And you're one of the good guys. And I thank you for your service to the community, our state, and our nation.
Appreciate that. Thank you, David.